Dearest gentle listeners, you are listening to the Ladies Bridgerton, the talk of the ton. This is our first official episode as a duo podcast. We are your effervescent hosts, your neighborhood-friendly Kiwi, Tash from Middle-earth, New Zealand, and
I am Patty, Regency romance enthusiast, whose current chapter of her story takes place in Ohio. Settle down onto your favorite settee as we delve into the lives of the elite and illustrious ladies, lords, and royalty of the ton. This Bridgerton podcast is two friends talking romance, symbolism, Easter eggs, and deep diving into the connections of our favorite characters.
If you are not up to date with season 3, please go and watch that first and pop back once you are all caught up, as this podcast will contain spoilers.
Okay, today we will begin season 3 with episode 1. We will discuss Colin and Pen and how they've transitioned from the people we see them be at the end of season 2 into players in the marriage game in season 3. And we'll give our musings on all things Polin from this episode.
Now we must make haste into today's episode.
So let's start with Penelope. At the end of season 2, our girl is broken. She has broken up with her best friend in a volatile uncovering of her secret identity. And she has lost all hope in believing in her fantasy that Colin Bridgerton could ever return her feelings. So how do you think that plays into how we see her at the beginning of season 3, episode 1?
I think that one ball undid a lot of the growth that Penelope had done throughout the season in gaining belief in herself, in her abilities, in herself as a person, because she went from like slowly building up her character, starting to actually stand up for herself a little bit, starting to be a little bit more open and receptive to Colin's kind of growing interest in her. Not interest, because he always had interest in her, but he was now being a lot more forward in the fact that he was making legitimate steps to court her, to act as, his intentions. And then in that one moment, I think it really showed just how much growth she still had to go, because with one sentence to men that Colin himself has said that he does not deem as respectable, she immediately believed that he would never court her, that he would never. It just basically wiped away all hope, all fantasy, but also any respect that she had for him, that he was willing to put her down in such a way. And she truly believed the words that he was saying.
Yes, like I said in the last episode, his character in every other situation has been, he stood up for Penelope, he stood up for Penelope, he stood up for Penelope, and she could not extract this anomaly. This became his core belief system to her. And so it plays into season 3, because when we come into season 3, they've been in the country. They're coming back to London for the season, into Mayfair. And she is excited to be home. Why? Because people are reading Lady Whistledown, which is literally the only thing she has left. And she's even been separated from that because she doesn't write in the summer. So she has had no Eloise. She has had no Colin, because she extricated herself from both of those relationships. Well, Eloise extricated herself, but she purposely didn't seek her out to apologize. I believe that was kind of
mutual in a way, because Penelope could have done as she always did, and she could have just bent over and taken what Eloise was saying to her and apologized and groveled, but she didn't. She bit back. And I think that was a really important character arc for her to go through, because she stood up for herself for a change. Unlike she doesn't stand up for herself with Colin, not until the end of this episode, which is another huge growth point for her and helps our little butterfly take her flight, which is beautiful.
Well, and speaking of butterfly, I think that this is really, she went into a chrysalis, is such a pretty name for the sludgy mess in the cocoon that the butterfly becomes.
That's the thing, is people were saying, oh, well, I liked Penelope beforehand. This is never to say that who a butterfly was before they turned into the butterfly isn't beautiful. The caterpillar is beautiful in its own way. The chrysalis
Yes.
is beautiful in its own way, as is the butterfly. It does not, her beauty at the end does not retract away, but it is an amalgamation of the growth that they go through. And it just
Yes.
pieces all of those parts together. So it's not to say that Penelope was not beautiful beforehand, because she has always been stunning. But that final form is what we needed from her, is what she needed from her.
Yeah. So I think that losing both of these major relationships, her only positive relationships, which she lost in a way that were reflective of the language that was used in her home, which I think was very powerful in hearing this come from two very trusted people. So it must be true, right? All of a sudden it must be true. So if she goes into her cocoon, she retreats from everyone, and now she is fully immersed in her home life without fantasy, without friendship, without anything positive. She has nothing positive until she comes back to London and she has Whistledown.
I think that Eloise actually feeds into part of the fantasy as well, and she crushed that. You see in different, throughout the seasons, Penelope kind of digging for little compliments about Lady Whistledown. Just subtle little,
Yes.
oh, what do you think of this? Oh, don't you like the way that she wrote this? We can see that it is something that she is proud of, and she never gets any credit for it. She has accomplished something fantastic for herself, but she kind of doesn't get any of the, not bragging rights, because that's not really what Penelope is about, but she doesn't get any of the pride from anyone for it. And in season 1, we see Eloise is very much a fan of Lady Whistledown. Season 2, she's still a fan, but now she's starting to become a little bit fanatic about women's rights and she's being hard on Lady Whistledown for not doing more, which I can understand both sides of the coin. And then in the end of season 2, she crushes Penelope, not just as Penelope, but she puts down Lady Whistledown.
Yes.
And she crushes that final piece of hope, that fantasy that Penelope has, that maybe my friend will be proud of me. And that is a moment that they've changed from the books, and it hurt. It really hurt to have.
Yes, it hurt.
Because she needed that. She's had so little in her life, and she needed that.
And I think that as we see, like in a later episode, where someone else asks Eloise to write with her, in rewatching some season 2, I feel like Penelope is trying to help her figure it out, wants her to figure it out. She's not just going to tell her. And I think that's the big issue with Eloise. Why didn't you tell me? But because these two women, young women, are so intelligent, Penelope wants her to figure it out. And then I think she wants her to write with her. Like she wants her to be a part of it with her somehow. And I get that feeling all the way up until, especially in the scene in her bedroom after their family's ruined, where she's helping her. Like Marina's story was different because it's personal. Like she's giving her clues, like, figure this out. I want you to figure it out. But then she doesn't. And then when she does, Eloise is more hurt by the fact that Penelope never told her, and she's been in front of her face this whole time.
I think she's embarrassed. That embarrassment and jealousy, just like the character arc that her brother goes through this season, presents as anger. And come on, Bridgertons, do better. Like our girl Penelope, I know she's a very polarizing character. People either love or hate Penelope because they deem Lady Whistledown to be cruel. And I think those perspectives are a little bit, they're not putting themselves in the shoes of Penelope. And I think the season really, I hope it changed a lot of perspectives, because I love the moment where she gets in the end, where she gets to explain her perspective, because I the whole time could put myself in her shoes and see how and why this has come about. But I think for those who aren't as soul-crushingly empathetic as me, they needed this moment to see and hear that it wasn't coming from a cruel place. It was coming from a place of revere for the Ton, for the interest of the Ton.
Well, and I was talking about this with a friend of mine who just finally finished season 3. It took her a while.
Oh,
Um, her only one and only watch through, mind you. I've
oh.
seen it like I can't even tell you how
How
many
many times a
rewatches I've
night do
done.
we watch it through?
Right. She finally got through her first time watching it. She's a one and doneer. But I was telling her, I was like, everybody has that experience where they love somebody or they want to help somebody that they care about, and but they do it in a misguided way and it kind of blows up in their face. Their
Mhm.
intentions are good, but they still hurt the person they love. And we got to remember that Penelope started this when she was 16 years old.
Yep.
If anybody can remember when they're 16 years old, I would love to have a 16-year-old, 40 something year old person, or heck, I mean, she's now 19. If a
16-year-old me
19-year-old
was
person,
at home watching SpongeBob, spending my weekends in the arcade. Like, I was
yeah,
not writing gossip columns, going to balls expecting to snatch myself a husband, snatch myself a family title.
16-year-old me was not thinking about the safety of friends of mine when they asked me to cover for them because they wanted to do something they
No.
didn't want their parents to find out about. That
Mm-hmm.
was what 16-year-old me did because of where my loyalties lay. And that's
Yes.
exactly what 16-year-old Pen is like. She's making decisions as a 16-year-old that she shouldn't have been making. And it hurt
Yes.
her friends and people she loved. So
I never
coming
thought
into
about
season
that.
3,
That's a
yes,
great spin. Like the lies that we tell for our friends, and we see it happen. Season 2 isn't Eloise with you this afternoon? Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. And then Penelope's like,
yeah, that was
hey,
Colin.
yeah,
I thought she was gonna do flower arranging with you.
yeah.
Oh
And it's like
yeah.
flower arranging, Eloise. Really, are you guys that thick? Come on, like, or as Portia would say,
Well, we're
you're
not
very.
okay. We're not even,
Portia would say, you're very pretty.
yeah, we're not even gonna get into how the Bridgertons are written to be the most obtuse family in the ton this
Oh,
season. I'm just
um,
gonna say we there's gonna be a whole episode of every
good thing
instance
they are
where
pretty.
good thing that all of them are pretty. Yes.
Um, although that is one label that you could never put on my homegirl Hyacinth because she is not obtuse. She is the opposite. And I'm
She's
looking.
just not old enough where she feels comfortable to say, I knew it.
She just makes little snide comments to make Colin uncomfortable at the dinner table or breakfast table.
Right. Okay, so let's transition to Collins. We know Pen is broken. She's been without any kind of support all summer long. And she's coming into the ton thinking all she has is Lady Whistledown.
Colin doesn't have much more going for him either. He is an
True.
untitled third son. His best friend has stopped writing to him. His family, come on, Violet, what are you up to? I know you got 2 daughters on the marriage mart, but she did not write one letter in return to him. And this boy was left on his own, traipsing through the Mediterranean, traipsing through Europe, doing it so tough, as Cressida would kindly remind him.
Well, and here's my thing. So our lover boy, because I 100% believe he gave intentions at the end of season 2,
He went
he
away with
said,
the
I will,
thought of coming back to Penelope.
yes. He went away with, I've said my piece. She has reciprocated. She says I'm special too. Like
You're very special, Colin.
he's like little hearts around his face going, she says I'm special. Yay. And so, but then she ghosts him. She 100% ghosts him. And he's like, what? And he's got to go on this tour that's probably already planned, or maybe not. Maybe he's like, okay, her and
I
Eloise
think he's a
are,
free baller, to be honest. I think he just goes with the flow because
he just leaves.
keep in mind that Grace he just did at the drop of a hat. And I think when you are that wealthy, that people do just make things happen for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we see Anthony just like, India, let's go. Like,
Like it's not a 2-month trip.
right. We know from the end of season 2, they were around for a while, and we know he was only gone 4 months this time, and he comes back right at the beginning of the season. So there was a period of time after the Featherington Ball where he's chilling, waiting for something.
Yes, because it's actually quite a while before I know the timelines can seem a little bit confusing sometimes and into when things transpire, but keep in mind that Anthony and Kate still had to get married. We don't see them get
Mhm.
married. We just see them at the
Aubrey
manor.
Hall at the end of
Thank
season
you.
2,
We see
already
them at
married.
we see them at Aubrey Hall, already married, hanging out with the family, away in the countryside for the summer, and then we then jump into season 3, which is beginning of
Hmm.
Marriage Mart again. But there's a whole
And
chunk
they
of
just
time.
came back from their honeymoon. They've been back a whole week, and Colin's been gone 4 months. Nobody's expecting him to come home, and he shows up completely physically changed, different clothing. I mean, he got sturdy.
He has gone through his hot girl summer.
Yeah, he went through hot girl summer because he was like, I've not heard from this girl. What's going on? And at first, I don't know if anybody, like, this is an old, it's actually Martin Short. It's an old comedy piece of his where he says, the girl always, when she breaks up with the dude, she's got to go out in her hottest dress and whatever. And she's like, F him, girl, F him. Like, he went through his FU stage and did a bunch, that's where he's like rushing through all these cities, and he's consistently writing her.
Well, I mean,
He doesn't
I
he
think
doesn't stop writing her.
I think Taylor Swift says it best this time. I just want to know if rustling my sparkling summer was the goal. He's like, I just want to go away and live my best life, and you are rustling my sparkling summer by not writing me back. Like, where's my girl on my holidays? He just wants
Right.
to go out and have his hot
And
girl summer, and she is dampening that spirit. He is lost without his compass.
the traveling before was 10 months long. He immersed himself in it. He did all the things. It's like, how in the world do you not go to Greece and not climb Mount Olympus? And why does
Mm-hmm.
he do that? So he can write about it because he's excited. And that's when he's learning. Penelope's excited about it too. He writes about everything, and she writes back and she's excited. So that encourages him to do more stuff. I mean, the stuff she's telling him that he did at the beginning of season 2 is like huge things. But in this travel that he did, he rushes through 17 cities in Spain, France, and Italy in
That's
4 months.
4 months, so that's
So
16 weeks. He's got 6.5 days per city. And that's probably about the amount of time that you need to
that's
travel between them.
yeah, he's there's probably cities that he's only staying in half a day.
Because keep in mind, even if a distance is drivable, let's say, well, you know what I mean by drivable. Back then,
Yeah.
carts, I don't know what the average speed of a horse cart were, but it's probably very determinant on the landscape that they were traveling on, whether he was traveling in a cart or just by horseback. I could very much imagine Colin just on horseback going between, but that is not a lot of time to get between cities back then.
No.
Like when we consider that England and Scotland are quite close together, but it still takes 2 weeks to reach Kilmartin House. So that tells me that he was essentially just traveling on the go consistently, maybe spending a night in each major city as he goes.
A fast team of 2 horses can go between 5 and 8 miles per hour.
Yeah, so he was definitely on the go. He did not,
He was
he was
only
stopping
traveling. He was experiencing
nothing.
nothing.
He was just moving forward, but towards
Yeah.
nothing, no goal.
And honestly, for somebody who's so upset that somebody didn't write him back, he didn't stay anywhere long enough to get a letter.
I kind of wonder, one, I think that's a little bit of a continuity error, but two, I think originally that he would tell Penelope where he would be based next because he had a set itinerary that he was potentially
Yes.
following,
And
except for with
and if we
Scotland. Because Scotland, he follows the word of that old man that he meets. This is a book part,
yeah,
not
a book
series.
a book thing, yeah.
And because obviously we haven't heard him go to Scotland in this series, which is a shame because that was a big.
I think that's season 4. I think he goes with
Oh.
Penn because that's where Eloise is, and stories have to happen there. So
Yeah,
I think
Okay.
they travel to Scotland in season 4. That's my guess. But
that's our
but anyway, so
prediction.
he probably goes to the first city and he travels to a few cities around it, but he probably keeps coming back to that first one, like checking for a letter, checking for a letter, checking for a letter, and not get one. So that makes the travel time for all these other cities like nothing.
Yeah.
Like traveling isn't as fun to him anymore because he doesn't have anyone to
He has
share it
no
with.
anchor.
Yes.
He doesn't have his family as an anchor, and he doesn't have Penelope.
So that's why he comes home so fast. But he wants to look like this time everything's changed. He's grown. He wants to come back for Penelope and to show her he's at least physically ready. Like he knows something's happened and he knows something's changed. Not sure what, but he needs to come home looking like he has his crap together.
He also has the words of Anthony sitting in the back of his head from the fight with Marina. I should have sent you off to the brothels after you came back from Eden. I should have let you wet your wick, because without that, you're going to just pick the first girl that shows you interest. And he thinks, okay, I need to actually be ready. Like I need to be able to be a husband. And I think Anthony drills into him that you cannot be a husband unless you physically know how to do the husbandly acts. And Colin is very much lost in his role. Go little excitement.
Also, I'm also like, and the way you said that was like, because of that conversation about Marina, he is ghosted by Penelope. He's not getting letters from her. He doesn't know what's going on. And he has that moment of like, maybe I misread everything, like Marina. So now he's like, maybe Anthony was right. And that is why he enters his first brothel, because he's like, I've got to
sow my oats.
I've got to sow my oats. Maybe my feelings for her were spurred on by the suggestion from Marina, and they're not real.
Yeah.
And he goes through everything he goes through on his travels. And I mean, Colin's not Benedict. He's not somebody that enjoys that freedom, or he wants a wife. He wants a family.
I think we've also got the point of the age-old saying, the only way to get over someone else is to get under someone else. And I think that is very much what I think Colin is trying to distract himself. Penelope is not writing me back. What if she's married? What if I've missed my chance? What if I thought I was taking this time to be ready for her and I've missed my shot? Because there is a reason that she's not, to him, they left off in a really good place and now she's ignoring him.
And it gets old. So he comes home early. He's got to figure out what's going on. And he comes home to a situation way worse than he even imagined. Like he sees his family. He sees his family. He sees everybody ready to go to the presentation. Nobody recognizes him right away. And then he looks across the street and he sees Pen watching them. She is not
from the shadows,
the inner circle anymore.
She's from the shadows.
She's in the shadow of a bush and he doesn't know what's going on. And, he learns that her and Eloise are still on the outs, and he probably figured by now they would have had that figured out.
That's because a little chrysalis requires a bushy little hideaway to protect themselves in before they can unfurl their wings.
And when he is recognized finally and he walks up to his family, Penelope looks betrayed. She's not changed at all. She's still the same person. And he comes back. I think it brought back all those words. All those words came flooding back to her. But I think it's also like he grew up and I didn't.
I take it as, in the words that he left with were words that she did not recognize as being him, and now he's returned. He has a completely different appearance. He's schmarming. He's being Shadow Colin.
Schmoozy.
He's schmoozy. He's that, and I don't even want to use the term charming, because Colin beforehand was charming. He was authentically, charmingly himself. The words that he used to pick up, when I say pick up, I mean uplift their spirits, was genuine and kind, but also detached.
Flirty.
It was harmlessly flirty, but I think he also did it in a way to be kind to others, like especially those who may not have been a first choice or weren't all sought after. And I think he did it in a kindness, because Violet very much raised him to be that way. Be a gentleman, show everyone, like, no one should be left on the wall. Everyone deserves attention. And if you show them attention, that may
Other people will
lead, because if a Bridgerton shows attention, others will follow suit. So I think he came from being this very genuine, very charming, very honest person, and he comes back and he's now superficial. He's very superficial. He's very surface. He's very schmoozy. He's being very not
I
just.
see he's playing what he has seen his big brothers do.
Yep, he's put on his armor.
He's got his armor on. He's playing the role society expects him to play. And because he is such an authentic person at heart, it's hard to do. It's not easy. And it comes off inauthentic. The girls are eating it
because they're not authentic girls. And that's why they eat it up.
They are just eating it up. But for him, it's I almost feel like it's practice. Like he's practicing because he doesn't know how he's going to be received by Penelope, and he's building up that admiration of others, kind of, hardening his armor because he knows he's eventually got to talk to her, and he's not sure the reception he's going to get, So I think part of it's practice, like he wants to be smooth. It's that awkward dude who wants to talk to the girl he likes, and he just wants to be smooth. And he doesn't realize that what she loves is his true authentic self. Right now, he thinks like she's completely lost all interest. And for her, she believes he never had interest, but all the time he's been attracted to her true authentic self. And their biggest issue is communication. But he comes in like, screw this. Timing. I'm just going to be, their timing is, and time is so important in this season. And that now is the time because she ups the timeline. She has to for her own sake. But he does come back like, this is what society wants me to be. I guess I'm going to play the game. He's all about, I'm just going to play the game. And we see that with Eloise too, because she hasn't been with, she's been without Penelope. She hasn't been able to be authentically herself either, because Penn was both of their safe space, that she is also playing the game. She's wearing the trendy clothes. She's hanging out with the mean girl. She's hanging out with
Cressida Cowper,
but I'm drawing a blank now. What's the girl's name from Mean Girls?
Regina George. She's
Regina George.
Yeah.
She is the Regina George of,
but she is very much the main character of that, where she comes in authentic and changes. She gets touched by the mean spirit. She gets touched with the mean wand. And sort of, I mean, she's never outwardly cruel. Unless you want to count a wee cheeky Barb.
Cressida?
No, Eloise. Unless you want to count the what was the stitch type that she said? And then she says, oh, whatever stitch.
Oh, the shift stitch.
The shift stitch. Just shift this conversation. Oh, a jest.
Yeah.
How clever.
Well, and I think
I love that.
I love the shift stitch. And that's the thing though, like, because we learn a lot in this season that her and Colin are pretty much the same person, just one is female, one is male. They both struggle with society because they're truly very authentically themselves. Like he is very caring and empathetic and just a feeler and has big emotions. And Eloise is passionate and like she believes in women's rights. And these are very much things that are, I think, looked down upon in society. She is actually
incredibly empathetic, but she then gets lost in her distraction of women empowerment, because in the first season we see, Penelope has just been put on the marriage mart and her introduction to the Queen presentation to the Queen didn't really go well. I want to go see how she is. She is empathetic, but she loses that quality. And we see it with Benedict a lot. They really have those deep conversations together. So she does have a lot of empathy in her as well. But I think the season is about her kind of
understanding that
lost.
People think differently than her.
Yes. And
she understands people's feelings, but she doesn't understand why people don't think the same way she does. And that's why, like, we learned she really truly didn't know Penelope in a way, because she just believed Penelope wanted everything she wanted.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I think they both needed to be separated from each other. Colin and Penelope needed to be separated from each other to actually
yeah.
all go through a development that all of them kind of needed. They all needed the growth, and none
Yes.
of them were actually willing to give, and they were in a society that did not foster communication, but they were all in a society where they were each playing a certain role that were harmful to their own development.
They were playing childhood friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when Penelope was launched on Society in season 1 too early, we see in that park scene where she says, "Mama, can I go play with Eloise?" And her mama's like,
Ladies don't
"Young
play.
debutantes do not play with their friends. Fine, can we go promenade for suitors together?"
And she was just very
So
much playing, promenading for suitors. She wasn't actually doing
right,
it.
it was like playing Barbies.
Mummy, can we go play husbands and wives?
Yeah, can we go play house? So I think that they all had that period of time, as everyone does. I have a few relationships with people that I knew as children, and I struggled. I mean, my biggest best friend breakup was somebody that I knew when we were kids. We struggled with that transition into adulthood. We separated, and
Yeah.
now we've come back together. We've been friends again for the last 15 years, and it's completely just as deep. We are each other's safe space, and I think they needed that time apart because they had to come back together and realize we're adults now. This is messy. Where do we fit into each other's lives?
Yeah.
Do we fit into each other's lives still? I mean, we really needed to see that transition, especially because,
See, it's different.
babyface
Childhood.
Luke Newton and babyface Nicola Coughlan, who are both in their 30s. Oh, and Claudia Jessie is in her 30s. And they
Yeah.
are playing teenagers that we had to see them grow up. There had to be that transition and separation so that they can come into what is truly their adulthood.
Well, and I think that's the thing is the friendships that we make as children, they are literally just down to proximity. Are you close to me? You live near me? You're in my class? Okay, we're
Yeah.
friends. And we choose friends just literally based on proximity as children. And then in adulthood, we choose friendships sort of the same way, but it is definitely you meet someone, okay, you've got proximity, but then you have other criteria. And as we kind of
Common
grow,
interests, values. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's where some of those childhood friendships kind of suffer because they don't stand the test of time of are we genuinely enjoying each other's company or is it nostalgia? And I think Penelope and Eloise have both had to go through um this transition. And I think even a little bit Penelope and Colin, do I genuinely love Colin for Colin? Or was it the idea of Colin? Was it the fantasy of Colin? Was it
Mm-hmm.
being Eloise's sister? Was it getting to marry into the Bridgerton family? And I think she had to really assess, was it Colin that I loved? Or was it the idea? And I
Yeah,
think,
she had to go down that other path, and she had to see where that path might lead her to decide if her feelings for all of that, both of them, was genuine and true and would
mhm,
stand the test of adulthood, because adulthood is messy.
it is. Trying to record this podcast is messy between all the real life things coming up and skewing life.
Well, and I mean, we're a true example of what you look for in a friend in adulthood, because I genuinely call you my friend, but we're not in close proximity at all. But we do have common interests and values and things like that. We're very,
Eloise would have
so
loved the internet to be able to just find like-minded people
yeah,
at the click of a forum group.
yeah, she would definitely be somebody with like a Discord channel or a Reddit channel, like finding like-minded people.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, she'd be on all of the apps. She'd be on TikTok. She'd be on Insta. She'd be
Hmm.
spreading her woman empowerment everywhere. And I think she would have done it alongside. It could have been like a little duo. Like you see, a lot of like Instagram, TikTok, famous kind of people. Like they've got their little groups of it. And I think Colin would have had his travel blogs. Eloise, would have been
He would have had, well, and I think Colin would have a travel blog. Colin would also have like a show on National Geographic.
yes.
Right? He would have a show on National Geographic, and I absolutely think like Penelope would have a reality show.
She would
Type
have
of
been
thing.
who's Kelly Clarkson. She'd be our Kelly
Oh, she'd be
Clarkson
like a talk show. Yeah, like a talk show host.
yeah, talking about people, talking
But
about life.
but do you
And
think
they would all
she be daytime or nighttime?
she's a daytime girl. Come on. She's not into the
But some of the seedy gossip stuff, like you can't talk about that before a certain time of the day.
that is true.
But you know who she'd really like. I think she's, and we don't really have them now because I believe both of them have passed, but like the true Ann Landers and Dear Abby.
Yes.
She would be an advice columnist.
Support columnist, yeah.
For sure.
She'd be great at that.
But we digress.
We need we're gonna have to get
story.
Valley, the bugs.
Right.
We are coming up with little sayings to get ourselves back on track when we start side tangenting too far.
You guys give us ideas for how to get ourselves back on track when we go off on a tangent.
my favorite, and I think this is just like I think the entire internet would agree that Valley, the bugs. The bugs. It was just the perfect.
It was like, okay,
look
this
over
is
here,
the ball, guys. Yeah.
Yes.
Look this way.
Yes. So getting back to our main.
We know how they. So we understand where they are coming in. And I think the best conversation we can have now is why does the timing change? Because Penelope was during that whole time, like he's realizing there may be a future there at the end in season 2, but he has some work to do on himself and he knows that, but he's kind of like coded talking to her. Like they can't out and out say things in Regency era. It's all coded.
Yes. But, you know, in front of the Featherington Bridgerton house, we didn't actually get any interaction aside from them kind of looking at each other, and they were both looking lost. They were both out of place. They were displaced. They were not anchored, and they were free floating. Like, where do we go from here? Penelope's holding on to the anger. He just let his
family lead him away, and she's like, I'm not liking this anymore.
No, and like he kind of turned his back on her, like, well, if you're going to turn your back on me, if you're not going to write me back, I'm going to turn my back on you. And I was like, I think he needs time to kind of process.
And that's why I think he knew about the rift between Eloise and Penn beforehand. And the reason he keeps asking about it, because it's lasted so long, right? Because he was only gone 4 months, and we know the off season is longer than that. So he would have known
the off season's
not coming
9 months, because it's literally just spring. Spring is the debutante season.
Yeah, it's 9 months, and he didn't come back. He wasn't there right at presentation day in season 2, so they said he was gone 10 months.
Well, they said he came back. He was stuck in presentation traffic.
No, at the beginning of season 3, yes.
Oh, sorry,
but in season 2, he was not there for presentation day.
No, he came back a day late.
Or however many. Like I think every episode is about a week or so, like in time frame to cover the whole season. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, he was gone 10 months the first time. He was only gone 4 months. So I think before he left, he knew something was wrong, but he figured, meh, they're best friends. They'll figure it out. And he comes home. He comes home, and it's like, this is not cool. Like, what's going on?
We did see them fight in season 1, where you know, season 1 definitely, where Penelope says, you know, we can't all just be a pretty Bridgerton, and Eloise takes that as like the deepest insult that one can possibly throw.
And honestly, if you're looking from Colin's point of view, he may not have witnessed their conversation at the Featherington ball, and Eloise was outed, and Eloise was not hanging out with Penelope. Penelope doesn't want to hang out with me right now. Remember that from the drawing room? So he may not have witnessed that conversation. So he may think that they're not hanging out because Eloise still feels on the outs from society, and she's but he's assuming at some point in the country, they'll reconnect and they'll figure it out. When Eloise realizes she is not going to hurt Penn's reputation, because he thinks so, like Penn's reputation is so important to him. He's assuming Eloise is sensitive to that as well. So that's probably why he goes off traveling. Like they'll figure it out. Once Eloise realizes her reputation isn't as hurt as she thinks that it is, she'll reconnect with Penelope, and then he comes back and what? Like, WTF? What is going on?
Because I think he thought it was just a spat and that it wasn't anything that would actually require the intervening with. And I think he realizes, maybe I do actually have to intervene because this has gone on too long. So we come back in, we get that first interaction, and
at the presentation.
Are we going to look at the presentation? We're going to look at their first.
Sorry, that's their
not Penelope and Colin. Not Eloise and Colin.
Oh,
but
okay.
Eloise is also very much. If we're looking at the presentation, then the only other person who kind of acknowledges Colin's new appearance and new armor that he has put on is Eloise and Penelope. And Penelope doesn't even actively do it herself. She does it through Whistledown. And I was kind of surprised that Eloise doesn't call Penelope out on it. Yes, I think it is because she actually genuinely believes that Colin needs to hear it.
Yes.
Not that he respects
and she wanted to see if it would hurt him, and he brushes it off like it doesn't hurt him, but we know it really hurt him.
It does. He's fragile.
Because by the end of season 2, he was calling Marina Lady Crane pretty easily. And in that moment, after he read Whistledown and he was brushing it off, he did the
straight back to Lady
Miss Thompson. Yeah. Miss Thompson, Lady Crane business that he was doing when that was all still weird. Before we talk about their first interaction at that garden party, I think it's important to note, just for Colin's sake, that he tells his brothers that this trip, he doesn't give them any details, and he tells them that he got a sense of proportion while he was gone. And as somebody who loves script analysis, I think the use of the word proportion is important. There are kind of 3 definitions to proportion. One is, as the noun, a relation of something to its whole. Then the verb, which is the size of something or comparing something to in relation to something else. And then the last thing is kind of putting something in proportion, is not comparing the relation, but making it fit with something else. So the use of the word proportion there tells us that while he's on his travels, he is considered his place in his family, his part with the whole. He is now evaluating himself in proportion to something, which is Penelope, and then the wanting to put himself in proportion with something, which I also think is he wants to pursue Penelope. I think this wording of the use of the word proportion is him signaling through vocabulary in the scripting that he spent this travel time evaluating his relationship with Penelope, and he's made the decision, whatever he comes home to, he wants to actively not so much separate from his family, but he
wants to create a home with someone else.
Yes, he's ready to put himself in a family with her. He wants to become a family with her. He's ready to actively pursue her.
I think that the words that he uses with the gentleman at Mondrick's ball is really telling to this point, because we've seen him. We don't know it yet, but he's been philandering about all over Europe with other women. And what he says to the other lords in Mondrick's is, and you are much better at remembering exact passages than me, but he talks about why are we being so cavalier about something that holds so much meaning? And he's saying, why are we talking about sleeping with women as if it is something
recreation
so
only,
shallow? And then we see it again in his passage in his book when he's writing about sleeping with a French woman, and he's saying about how is it that one can be so intimate and yet feel so alone at the same time?
Well, and the thing is a lot of people have assumed that the writing that part of the journal that he's talking about having sex. That's not what he said. He says, as I trace freckles from cheek to collarbone, and as I see starlight dancing on skin. Women have exposed skin even while they're clothed. I think this is part of his charm, like learning charm himself, or his fake charm, because he's naturally charming, but he had to learn.
I take it as he was sleeping with them, because the way that Penelope kind of read it.
I absolutely believe he did get an education on his travels. I fully believe he did, but I don't think for him that it was recreational. And I think that part of what he did when he was on his travels was he, like he said, he hardened himself. So he put himself in situations.
I think it was recreational. I think he was so lost without
He was trying to do it without meaning.
No, he was searching. Penelope had been his compass. She had been his anchor, and without her, he was lost and he was floating, and he was searching for someone to fill that role that she had fulfilled. And so he is searching for it in these women, and the more women that he searches for it with, he is realizing they cannot fill this role.
They're not providing it. Yeah.
I'm with women in a way that should be so personal, that should be so fulfilling, and yet it is leaving me feeling so empty. And I think he comes home because he cannot take that emptiness anymore. And he realizes that the only way to get that proportion back in his life is by going for Penelope, the only person who has ever given him sense of proportion, who's ever given him sense of purpose, who has ever had faith in him, who has seen all of him, not just the Bridgerton name.
Well, and that's his maturity. Like, yes, he went through, I mean, a very American term, he went through his hoe phase, but
his rake phase.
His rake phase. He went through that phase because he lost the person that held that kind of meaning for him in a real way, because we all know, like, Marina was infatuation with being taken seriously, infatuation with his white knight syndrome. There was infatuation with finally, creating a family, because he didn't really understand what love was at the time. It was very much
he was wanting the happy ending, but didn't realize that the person on your arm to create that happy ending is just as important as the ending.
Right. And once he realized his intentions for Penelope and then she ghosted him, I can understand this from personal experience, because the first person I ever considered wanting to, be intimate with was not on the same page. And it definitely, this is very personal, but definitely I went through a period of, I threw it away. Like, whoever showed any kind of interest next in me, like, I just was like, okay, like, I didn't even think about it. I was just,
it is hard to take that rejection.
Happy somebody. Yes, he felt very rejected. If we actually look at Marina, because I've now been in my rewatches seeing the mirror of Marina especially with the letters in the scene where Penelope tells her in season 1, like, those letters, the most recent letter was a forgery and she can prove it. Then Marina says, well, regardless of that, he still hasn't written me. He abandoned me. So it doesn't matter. Her love for him doesn't matter because he abandoned her, because he didn't respond to her letters. And now we have Colin, who has Penelope not responding to his letters, and he probably very much feels abandoned. So he's just like gonna do whatever, like, even if he was saving himself, because he is the family kind of guy, like, he's always wanted a family. So if he was saving himself, because if he came home from Eton and didn't even be like how Gregory, when Gregory goes, I can't believe you're getting married without me.
You mean the family pet?
Yeah, the family pet. When he says, I can't believe you're getting married before I'm even old enough to go to one tavern with you. Like, Colin wasn't like that with his big brothers. Yes, he wanted to fit in with his big brothers, but he wasn't a take me to White's. Let's go gambling. I mean, he did go to the fights and stuff with them, but he definitely he wasn't like, let's go to, you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't all eager to do those things that his brothers did. He kept himself apart from that. So I always took it like he was saving himself, but then the person who seemed to not want it anymore, he's just like, well, just gonna give it to whomever. And, his sense of proportion is very important, because that signals to us that everything he does in those first 4 episodes, as we come into season 1 and we see, what happens and what he proposes, that the plan really is, in the end, the husband he wants her to find is him.
I'm just going to interject here that I think it is absolutely adorable that you think that we are going to be able to cover Polin in one episode. You are delusional.
Well, I created an outline in the hopes of. But just like Colin says, you can expect one thing, but what he learned from his travels is to always expect the unexpected.
I already expected us to go. I was like, I'm thinking 2 episodes. That's maybe achievable. But realistically, we have 4 major scenes of Penelope and Colin in episode 1, and we have covered 0.1 of them.
Well, I mean, and we're talking about like their mindset coming into season 1, which it's very important to establish their mindset, because Penelope did change the timing because her home life has changed. She
Well,
doesn't have any support. She doesn't have a best friend to go to and vent to. She doesn't have the Bridgerton's house to escape to. So
and
she is fully exposed to the abuse going on in her home.
even though her sisters have obviously never been very familial with her, she now has both Prudence and Philippa. They have both moved on in their life. They have both gotten married, and now Portia is putting the pressure on Penelope. You're going to be the one to take care of me, and that was Portia's plan all along. We see it in the books.
Mm-hmm.
That was her whole intention. Was
Well,
I will have the spare daughter, and she'll take care of me.
well, and just imagine too, her sisters are married and they live in their own homes. Yes, they visit a bunch, but they're really there to see their mother and to
I
eat her
don't even
food
think
because
it's
her
that.
cook is better.
They are there because they are used to being in a titled family, and they are
Living in a
unwilling.
certain way.
They are used to living in a certain way, and they are unwilling to give that up. So they are at that house all the time, not because any of them
The benefits of the house.
They don't really particularly have any care for each other. It's just whatever they can get from each other. And Penelope's also there, and she is Prudence's punching bag.
But Penelope is there a large portion of the time with only Portia, and Portia cannot say a positive thing to her.
No.
So she is fully exposed to that. And I think like that's what spurs her to make her changes and decide to take a husband is she sees Colin come home completely changed. She's remembering what he said to those other lords, and she sees him come home completely changed, grown up.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, why did he show up on presentation day looking like that?
Yes. And
she's like he's
that.
not here for me. Yeah,
No.
he's not here for me. He's coming to take a wife. I can't do this anymore.
And that was one of the
live
first
with my
things we
sisters.
hear. If you are asking me if I've come back to take a wife, you might find yourself disappointed or, of some term like that. And I think we need to wrap up a little bit here today, but I cannot wait to actually dig in the season in our podcast, talking just as much about Penelope and Colin, but also one of my other favorite storylines is Penelope and the Featheringtons and their kind of the dynamic growth that they have all together, because that is such a major storyline this season, and it's just as beautiful to watch. The Bridgertons are already a whole, they have their proportion with each other, whereas the Featheringtons are very fragmented amongst themselves, and to see each of them kind of find their place and grow together is a really beautiful arc to watch.
Well, and everything I've said about it, like, because we have the Bridgerton tree, when you have a plant, and I guess we'll say this plays into Debling too and his naturalist self, but when you have a plant, like, you have to water it, you have to nurture it for it to grow. And I think once Penelope and Colin get to the point where they openly voice their feelings for each other and they openly begin to love each other, and they're reflecting each other's love, it spreads into the Featheringtons, it spreads into her relationship with Eloise, it spreads out into the Bridgerton family, and some of those relationships are healed. Like, so many relationships heal in this season, and I think when
even
you have that
even some of the lords who were not gentlemen, we see them take note of Colin's stepping up to the plate, and they're like, okay, it's time for us to grow up. And that really is what it is. And I think once one man in a group is like, okay, this behavior is no longer acceptable, this is the expectation that I have. I don't want to play this game anymore. And I think it gave people license to realize, hey, we don't have to play that game. We can be our authentic selves. We can go after who we want to. We don't have to feel shamed or embarrassed. We can love openly. And I think that was a huge catalyst for a lot of the relationships that we see. And I love, Penelope walking down the aisle, and we see those relationships that they have now sprinkled their little love dust
sprinkled
their little love dust down the aisle. And it's beautiful, because it's like it's all their love, all of their personalities is just in the aisles. Yeah. And on the note of love dust, we need to wrap up the musings of two mad women.
Yep. So I think the next episode will actually go through the specific Polin scenes then of season 1.
Yep.
And how they play into the story, how they are, the trajectory of their storyline by scene, because we now have their mental state and why it's their time. So I look forward to talking scenes with you next time.
And as always, thank you for everyone for tuning in. If there are any thoughts, any things that you would like us to delve into, any actual whole episode that you would be really interested in us, please put them on the Facebook page, Lady Whistledown, a Bridgerton podcast, soon to be changed over to the Ladies Bridgerton, as we are transferring this into being our dual podcast together. So please hop over to that Facebook page, put in your requests of episodes that you would love for us to dig into, and we are happy to oblige. We'll put it on our to-do list, as one will. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. Yours truly, Lady Whistledown.
And Lady Patty.